Welcome Packers to the new update, the Combat Update Plus. It has new parts and editor features. Is PAC really renamed to PAC 4.5? No, it's just a funny meme. But think about it. We've come a long way already since MDL-zip was introduced, so I decided that I think it's more appropriate for users to count the version number in terms of features that they can enjoy. So that's why I call it PAC 4.5. Chapter 1, Combat. What does it mean for servers? Nothing. Everything's off by default. That means there won't be abuse in roleplay servers by default unless admins decide consciously to enable parts that they want. And there's many limiter convars to prevent abuse of various kinds. For users, they don't have to worry about being bothered by other people using combat parts because I have a consent system and consents are opt-in. That means that people won't get affected by any of the parts unless they decide that they're okay with that. It's compatible with CPPI prop protection. So if you have some prop protection systems and add-ons that use that type of naming convention for the functions, it'll work with that. But there's also a built-in one for PAC that if you have parts and the server, if you have entities and the server is in prop protection mode, if you don't consent to the things like damage zone or other stuff, your props or NPCs won't be affected. There's an admin settings tab. It contains most of what you'll need to get started. It's in the small menu and in the options settings menu. Here are the new parts: damage zone, force, lock, health modifier, hit scan, and interpolator. The damage zone does what it says: damage in an area. I made this because physical projectiles weren't really appropriate or optimal to do damage because of the physical aspect. They had travel time, and sometimes it didn't trigger properly for explosion type damage. So doing damage directly will be better for people. It supports hit sounds and hit parts as well as other stuff. The force part also does what it says. It pushes props, players, and NPCs physics-wise. It can give them a push or a rotation. There are many orientation modes and instant or continuous mode, so that you can do some kind of gravity or simply an explosion only once. There are many modes to choose from. I won't go into detail for all of them, but you can read that by hovering over the tooltips in the editor. Here are some uses: knockback without damage, and set up air combos. Again, this is one of the things that physical projectiles didn't do that well, because since they used the physics system, they also did damage when you tried to do some knockback that's too strong. But this will prevent you from killing your targets immediately when you want to push them. So there's a few things you can do. You can simply play with the physics engine. You can also use that to do some dashes, jumps, or grappling hooks. Damping will serve to reduce the velocity of entities. That will be useful for some things. There's a levitation feature. It's fun. Disclaimer: it does not work well with NPCs. In a continuous mode, because NPCs don't have good physics in the engine, they'll fly all over the place because they don't know how to control their velocity. Only the instant velocity, the instant push mode might work from time to time, but don't do it too often. The log part has many modes. It's multifunctional because all of these uses that we've thought over the years, it kind of fits in the log kind of concept or words. You can grab things, you can teleport yourself, or you can aim towards certain points. Sounds like an aimbot? Yeah. Well, it's configurable. You don't have to allow it if you're a server owner. But the combat update is there to give users more power to make creative packs and more functional ones. Take that as it may be. Health modifier. Also, it does what it says. It allows you to change the max health, max armor, the damage you take, multipliers, and it adds a new extra health bar system. What is an extra health bar? It's like a shield, an additional health pool that will take damage before your main health. Why it's good? It's for boss phases, shield systems that can plug into pack in a more detailed way, and it's configurable, so you'll figure out the stuff. This isn't how it works. Is that we multiply the health bars by a number of health bars. It's inspired by some JRPGs where the boss has its health counted in terms of like 100 times the health bar. Next, hit scan. It fires bullets. Pretty simple. Again, there's a few anti-abuse methods for that, because if you multiply the number of bullets by the damage, it can be abused to make too much damage. So the server can force the damage to be spread across all your bullets so that the max damage that you set in the server convar is actually enforced in terms of the number of bullets that get fired. Okay, let's see 3 main reasons why they won't work by default. Common issues that always get asked. Okay, first, I made it so that the functions in the code don't actually create the net receivers that are necessary for the communication between clients and servers by default until you restart the game or you reinitialize the combat parts. This is because I decided to be draconian in terms of enforcing the idea that to prevent abuse in terms of networking and in terms of like general griefing, the combat parts are disabled by default, and it's more stringent than that. Unless the parts are actually initialized, that is, if the server has the network messages definitions, malicious clients won't be able to send any messages at all. So there won't be any issue for server load until then. People often ask, why can't I damage players? It's because of consent. Again, you cannot bother other people unless they decided that they're fine with it. In the options, you can tell people to go into the option to configure their combat consents, but you can't force them. Another thing, there's an anti-spam method. It's like a burst mode. Only 60 combat actions are allowed per burst, but the lock part and the force part's continuous mode They spam a lot of requests. That's why they will stop after a while. That is the 60 limit. If you want to lift that limit, you go to the combat settings and you set the allowance to 0 to unrestrict it. Chapter 2, General Updates. Okay, another new part is the interpolator. It's a powerful movable part that is used to move some things between different positions. You know how the jiggle part is like a container that has springs and it contains parts inside it? Well, the interpolator will do the same thing. It will control where it goes. It works in terms of nodes. So you can select a handful of parts, and as you set the lerp value, that is the interpolation value, that's what it means, lerp, linear interpolation. As you set it, it will progress over all these parts gradually. And the reason for that part is that many times you need to move an object between different bones or even entities. So the aim of this part was to lift that major restriction of the PAC movables system. Possible uses: joints, camera transitions and paths, drones and pets, letting them go into different modes, or creating animations. You might have seen the GIF here. This is the same thing. There's a model here that spins, and when I activate the throw, the sword goes into the spinning model instead of the hand. So this is what I mean by some action animations. You can also reposition part between multiple options if you want. One of the sub uses for that is multi-aim parts, like picking between different aim parts to point another object. Next, the command part received a few upgrades. The dynamic mode will let you link a command to that PAC variable. Every time it's updated, it will rerun the command. There are alternates also for when the command gets hidden, so that you can save events. Instead of having pairs, you can have one command and one event, and when the event turns off, it will turn the other command to activate an alternative. There's also a delayed command and some presets for the PAC event commands, and this will support randomness and sequencing. Because another one of the common complaints that I received over the years is that because the client-side Lua was forbidden in most servers, you couldn't randomize your command events with the math.random code bit. So now you can do it in PAC. There's also the code editor panel, which, if you remember the script part, was an experimental thing that was used and imported from Wire Expression 2, I think. But I just reused it because it looked cool. It has some syntax highlighting. The proxy now has, just as the command part, an unhide expression, so that when it's hidden, it can send another number to the target parts instead of having pairs. There are extra expressions. What are those? They have multiple uses. One, compact your math, because you see, they compute before the main expression, so if your expression is too big, you can put stuff inside the extra expressions, and then on your main expression, you can have the abstract look that is simplified and shortened, so that you don't have to look to the other side of the earth to read the end of the text. Okay, also, these extra variables will be saved by the proxy and accessible by other proxies as well. so that you can send the math elsewhere to be reused. It's pretty convenient. I use it. This too has the code editor panel, which is good for proxies. And there's also multiple target parts so that you can send the math to multiple parts, so that you don't have to have 10 proxies doing the same thing. Next, the projectile got some updates too. I have an alternate collision mesh type that can block bullets. You can select the mesh's shape from other props. You can also freeze it because many people wanted to make platforms, but it wasn't stable. And the physics system kind of got in the way, because when they went on the platform, the player pushed the platform itself, which prevented to jump, so it was kind of annoying. There's also a remove on hide feature, so that when the outfit part is hidden, it will remove the projectile, like for bombs and other stuff. The event has now target parts and multiple target parts. Now, as you see in the speech bubble here, you might remember that target part was already a thing, but it's not true. It's not true. Target part used to mean something else than target part, so there was a big confusion with the proxies. For proxies, it sends the math to the part, so it's actually targeting the part. Like, the proxy targets the part, and the event would normally, we would want the event to target another part, but it wasn't that. It got data from another part instead. So it was more like the data source or the origin, because it was only used for a few events, which is not very useful. So I renamed it to targeted part to hopefully remove some of the confusion. The internal arguments are now visible, which doesn't change how it works, but you can easily copy-paste the settings into another event if you want to work faster. But then again, that's just a thing. The beam part has multiple endpoints, scroll rate, so that you can make it scroll without using proxies. It saves you some clicks. There's also auto hit pose function, so that like when you create projectiles, it will make a new hit pose local to itself, because how beams worked, well, they still work that way, but how part properties worked is that if you create a projectile, it creates a copy of the beam, for example, but the settings of the beams don't change. However, you can't make it dynamic. So that was the problem. You could make a beam that leads back to you, but not a beam that goes from you to the new projectile. So that's one of the things that this aims to fix. Sprites, sunbeams, and beams also have showtime dynamics, which is a thing that makes it so that you can do fades and bursts without proxies. Again, it's to save clicks, and it's also for optimization, because proxies do have a cost, and if we run the code directly, it's simplified and it's faster. But I think for most people, you're not at the point where you need that necessarily, but you try to make things optimal. Now, buttons are now toggleable and can have a duration. That's another thing that was that came up often. The whole routine of making a command event every time you want to make something toggle was tedious. So I figured that it should be done within the button instead. Same thing with durations. Command events can be sequenced as number series. That will be a powerful feature if you know how to use it. So you can use that for combos, alternate styles, and other things like that. For example, You can do combo plus to make your combo progress forward. Hat style, for example, negative to go back to your previous style. You can also set the sequenced value directly instead of doing plus and then plus and then plus again. The event wheel is customizable with colors, alternate styles, and a grid mode. That I prefer it that way, but maybe you don't. Anyway, it's a different way of doing it. The event wheel config is accessible in the options, as usual. And I also added a filtering mode so that you can filter out certain keywords. So instead of doing complicated and bothersome setups with command events using the hide in event wheel checkbox, that would be done better with the command, I think. The pack proxy command will support increment and decrement notations so that you can, instead of only setting the value to a specific number, you can make it progress up and down starting from that. It also supports the vector notation, as you see here. You can write notes into your parts for the editor so that when you hover over it, it will say information. That will be good for tutorials and reminding yourself of what certain parts might do. Some text fields will support multi-line. For example, the notes. It will be useful for some things, and as we saw with the proxy code panels, here. This is multi-line. Now let's go back to where we were. All right, Chapter 3, Editor Features. Bulk select. Select multiple parts and perform mass or sequential operations. By default, you do Control-click to select with bulk select. And there's a whole menu that shows up, even if you haven't set some new part menu options. It will show up if you select bulk select parts. There are related menus like the bulk morph properties, which will be useful for color transitions, or the bulk apply properties, which is applying the same value to all of your parts. There's extensive customization. First, keyboard shortcuts. If you turn off the legacy mode, it will switch to the new system. So, this is the menu to edit your keyboard shortcut. You have actions, and you have three. You have up to three key areas so that you can define one button or two. Sorry, my scroll wheel rolled too fast. Okay, go back. This is so scuffed. Anyway, you'll see all your key bindings here. And there's also a capture input button so that you can enter quickly your button combination. Don't forget to confirm it after you've done your key combinations. You can customize your part categories. If you might notice here, this is the this is not the part categories. This is the part menu. This is the part menu actions. You can select different orders for your actions. Like if you don't often use load, you can remove that. If you don't use paste properties, you can remove that. It's all here. And there are new actions as well. And now part categories. It's the groups that you have on this section. If you want to remove the legacy group, you can do that. I have my own way of categorizing my parts. And there are also new camera editor camera movement stuff. You can tilt the view and move down. Quick setups. Another very useful thing. When you make stuff, there are common things that you do often, and it's useful to have some templates so that you can simply click once instead of setting up a bunch of stuff, because many of these setups require other parts, so it can be bothersome otherwise. So that's the useful of quick setups. You can bookmark assets, that is, sounds, models, and materials. You do that in the asset browser with right-click. You can right-click on a folder to add folders to your favorites, or on an asset to add it to your favorites. It can mark single files, numbered series, like look at these, Explode Epic Metal Soft 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It'll show up as an expanded menu when you access it here. You right-click on the relevant field to see the favorite models or sounds or materials. The player tab has some new stuff. I just wanted to put some information about your commands that you're using. It's not that useful, but I think some people might find some use to that. The arranging menu is a function that lets you put copies of a part around a certain part. Now, it has limited use because you don't always do that, but when you want to make some kind of wheel or spikes that are around a circle or a square or something else, it will save you some time. There are lots of new information in the editor. Pop-ups. They are customizable. You can put them on the parts or on the tree next to the part here. It will show you certain information like tutorials and reminders, like if by mistake you click off of a proxy but you didn't set a variable name, well, it will say that. It's a little bit of a nagging thing, but it will I think it will help some people to get to work better and tell them when they make a mistake from time to time. So, where can I access these tutorials? Press F1. This will open the relevant tutorial for the part class. For example, if I have a force, it will show the tutorial for the force part. Hover your mouse over the properties. So if you want to know what an option does, if it's not obvious, and if I wrote a tutorial for it, it will show you a tooltip that says what it does. Just hover your mouse over the text here. What about the proxy tutorials? There's a few ways to access it. For events and proxies, the info option here, view specific help or info about this part, will give you a detailed view of the information that needs to be done. That is, for events, it will try to show you the tutorial for the event type, and for proxies, it will show you the tutorial for the functions that are being used now. So, if I have the drift function, for example, it will show up here. It's a whole tutorial. But of course, practically it doesn't really work because people don't know all the functions that exist, and you don't want to write them all the time. So you can browse it in the inputs list for proxy functions. And it'll show up. It'll show up if you hover over the mouse here. There are many workflow shortcuts that have been done to speed up your process even more. So, first, there's flash property, the red thing here, that when you create a part, for example, it will autofocus to the relevant field so that you can simply write the thing. Every time you write an event, you always write something in the event field. Like, it's not optional. So why not do it automatically, since you always do it all the time? And speaking of events, if you write a number, it will set up a timer X. If you write two numbers, it will set up a timer X2. That is showing the part if the time is between two times, like before and after. Like after 1 second, but before 2 seconds, that's the range of 1, 2. Easy enough and pretty convenient. If you do that for a button, you can also have a button event. And otherwise, if what you wrote in the event isn't a known event type, it will assume that you're trying to write a command event. I use that all the time, wouldn't you know? There's double-click actions for some things. For example, you can rename your parts, you can write notes, or you can activate certain things. That too, I use it all the time with command events. Like you can double-click the command event to trigger it. Instead of like before the command update, like you had to close the editor, or at least hide the editor, I mean, and open your event wheel. That was so bothersome. But now you can do that with simply double-click. So there are modes for the base part and for specific parts, because you can choose whether you want to have those specific actions, like triggering the command event. Maybe you don't want to do that. You can do that. And clipboard support that a little bit better. For example, if you have a position and angle offset, you can copy these two at the same time. And so you don't have to copy once and paste it once, and then copy the other thing once, and then paste it again. It's kind of useful. Not always, but I'm thinking of many possible useful things. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. Anyway, a few actions. We're almost to the end. Lock on. That will force your angle to your view angle to follow a certain part. For example, here the sword throw. It's following the sword as it's thrown. Go to is like reset view position, except you can choose X, Y, or Z, or negative X, negative Y, or negative Z, or world X, world Y, world Z. You might use that. There's orthographic view if you wish. However, it has some issues, but don't mind it. At certain angles, sometimes it might have culling issues, so that like the world might vanish. But it's nothing I can fix. But you can still make use of orthographic view. Okay, that's one's a mouthful to say. You also have view follow entity on the front, back, or the left, right. Yeah. Chapter 4, upcoming features. So some of these, I already started development. For example, the proxy grapher is already mostly done, but I still need to polish it a little bit and fix some issues that I've encountered. But it's still pretty fancy. I like it a lot. It's one of the things that I'm proud of, and it will help people to understand the math better and play with the by playing with proxies. If you have the output visually, you'll understand it intuitively better. Some stuff that I want to do for the interpolator: support Bezier curves, multiple nodes to go beyond 20. and make it into a kind of proxy, because for camera transitions you also want to modify the FOV. So maybe the interpolator could do that instead of a proxy. Food for thought. And I haven't had a lot of ideas around that except the camera FOV stuff, but it might be powerful. It might be. Small things for the camera. Previewing the FOV when you put a part, it should show a pyramid to like a frustrum. It's like a cone, but in a square, to show you how big the view will be. It's a small thing, but it might be useful. Some people wanted to have a render target feature so that you can place what the camera part sees into another part, like a screen. I will not promise this feature because it has some issues. I'll try to make it work, but if I can't make it work without issues, it's not going to make the cut. Base movable updates. I want to expand the nearest live settings to select between multiple targets and other things. I also want to make it into a kind of a menu to automatically configure it. Well, not automatically, I mean more user-friendly. I also want to add aim part strength so that you can morph between the default position and aiming towards a certain part. That needs a little bit of work, but I already have a working prototype for that. Also, optimization things like this graph here. If you want to evaluate your packs and see which are the worst aspect of your pack, usually proxies that cost the most in terms of code and the biggest cost to FPS. Well, this should guide you with making packs. I cannot guarantee that I'll make pack faster, but I'll try to find more optimizations, like the tree. I might have talked about it in Discord before, but it still has some issues to fix before that. Particle updates. New position and angle spreads will be useful for stuff like halos and rings, because before you needed the uniform circular motion proxies to do that. But even then, because proxies only compute once per frame, it wasn't ideal because it couldn't fill the ring as quickly. You needed to let it run for a few frames, or make multiple copies of particles, which was not optimal. I also want to add lifetime functions so that the particle can do stuff when it lives. For example, random motion, as you might see in gases. It can spread around. Look at the outer ring here. You see these particles here? That's because they scatter around with the Brownian motion. I'll try to see if it's not too expensive in terms of code, because you still need to run all these functions every frame for every particle, which is a lot of times. However, it's probably not that heavy. I've tested it and it's not that bad actually, but it's another thing that I need to investigate further. A new part that I've been holding on to, the mesh trail part. Again, I have a working prototype, but there are still some issues to figure out before I release it. Why you need 3D models to make trails? Because in the real world, the objects are 3D, and if you have like a sword, it's like a rod, but as you follow it over time, its path is planar. But the 2D trails that we have don't do that very well. So that would be good for sword slashes and other stuff. Okay, the next major update that I plan to do within the next 1 or 2 years. This is a long-term thing, so again, no promises. I want to do the animation update with a new editor supporting multiple actors, like having your character and an object so that you can animate these two within the same animation, or having 2 characters. I'll try to make it generic so that it works with many use cases, but aside from that, there's a little bit of a nightmare that I need to go through, and that is designing the editor that I would add. The problem is, every time I asked for ideas, everyone had a different idea of what they want for the animation editor. So I can't reconcile all of the ideas. Many people just say, oh, do it like Blender, or oh, do it like that other program. But see, that's the problem. Everyone has their own program that they like. And I can't, and I won't do them all. I'll just settle on something that works. But yeah, that's one of my concerns. The picking some design elements so that we can have a base to work with. Because see, how the normal the current animation editor works is that the keyframes, they cover all the bones. But in other programs like Blender, each keyframe only handles one property. Like if you make a keyframe for the whole skeleton, it will make a keyframe for every bone. And sometimes it's useful because it's simple to merge them all into one keyframe, but sometimes you want to make asynchronous motion. Like they have a slight offset between different bones. Food for thought. That's the end of my presentation.